is here! The champ is here! The champ is here! The champ is here!
Pitt versus Tennessee, round 2. This time at Pitt. These two teams played this past season, right? It was a great game. I think the final score ended up being like 41-34 or something like that. It was a one-touchdown game. It was very early in the season, and we didn't really know how good Pitt was going to end up being last year. Not that they were a top 5 or top 10 team, but of course they ended up winning the ACC. Clemson, of course, with a down year. Miami and Florida State still circling the drain. North Carolina, very disappointing. So you ended up having Pitt versus Wake Forest in the ACC title game, which of course Pitt won. That game, Kenny Pickett ended up being on everyone's Heisman list towards the end of the year. And again, when this game was played early on, we didn't really know any of that really was going to happen. Tennessee did lose at home. They played this year on the road at Pitt. Pitt loses its quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Tennessee gets his quarterback back. He announced he's coming back. Year 2 for Josh Heupel. And there's some pretty high expectations for Tennessee from some people, depending on where you look. I actually saw some kind of top 25. Was it last week sometime? It was some kind of top 25 based on some sort of analytical database or something that had to do with returning production and all kinds of weird things. And they had Tennessee in the top 10. I don't know if I would go that far, but I do think Tennessee has a chance to have a good season. The best season it's had in a while. You go back to, was it 2016? Tennessee, I believe, won 9 games. I could definitely see something like that again for Tennessee. I think this game against Pitt early in the season will go a long way towards determining whether Tennessee has another, say, 7 or 8 win season, or possibly a 9 or 10 win season. I mentioned Pitt losing their quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Now, they have some other pieces coming back, and they get Kedon Slovis to transfer in at quarterback from Southern Cal, and I'm assuming he's going to be the starter for Pitt next year. Kedon Slovis has had sort of a weird career, in my opinion, at Southern Cal. He started for 3 years there, but he got worse every single year. If you go back and look, his best year at Southern Cal was his freshman season in 2019. He had something like, I think he had 30 touchdowns and like 9 interceptions. And then by the time he got to his junior year this past season, he had something like 11 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, or 9 or 10 interceptions. It just got worse every single year. His completion percentage went down every single year. His quarterback rating went down every single year. His touchdown to interception ratio went down every single year. It was just a weird career for Kedon Slovis. So who is Kedon Slovis? Is he the 2019 QB who, as a freshman, looked pretty good? Or is he the quarterback we saw the last 2 years, which is just kind of an average so-so quarterback? I don't know. Maybe a change of scenery is something that he needs. You know, Southern Cal brought in Lincoln Riley. Kedon Slovis could see, I guess, pretty quickly he wasn't going to fit in with Lincoln Riley's plans, especially with Lincoln Riley bringing Caleb Williams there from OU. So he transfers to Pitt. Is he going to be what Kenny Pickett was last year at Pitt? Probably not. I mean, Kenny Pickett had an all-time great year at Pitt last year at the quarterback position. And, you know, he had been there forever. I think it was his 6th year last year at Pitt. So, been there a long time. A lot of experience there. Kedon Slovis has a lot of experience, 3 years worth. This will be his first year in the system at Pitt. Tennessee, on the other hand, like I mentioned, brings back Hendon Ho, everyone's favorite prostitute quarterback, Hendon Ho. I'm just kidding. As far as I know, he's not actually a prostitute. But anyway, he returns, and expectations are high for Tennessee. Did you know Tennessee's never beaten Pitt? I didn't know that. Maybe this was something that came up last year when they got ready to play, and I just, didn't see it, didn't hear it, didn't read it anywhere, or maybe I didn't, I just forgot. But Pitt now 3-0 all-time against Tennessee after beating them last year in Knoxville. 2 of those wins came back in the early 80s, which was kind of like the heyday for Pitt football. They were coming off, what was that running back they had there in the late 70s, Tony Dorsett. They were coming off of that stretch there where they were winning a bunch of games every single year. Beat Tennessee twice, I think in 80 and 83, something like that. And then the third time they played was last year, like I mentioned, in Knoxville. this year playing at Pitt. What are Pitt's expectations for this year? You know, I'm not real sure. They did win the ACC last year. I seriously doubt very many people are going to be picking Pitt to win the ACC again this year. You know, last year, not to knock Pitt, but seemed like kind of an anomaly with Clemson kind of stumbling, especially offensively. I don't think Clemson is going to be back to dominating this coming season like they did from basically 2015 to 2020 in the ACC. But I do think Clemson's going to be the cream of the crop in the ACC this year, especially if they can get any improvement at all out of the quarterback position, whether that means DJ Ukulele plays a lot better this year or that freshman they're bringing in ends up being the real deal. I don't know. But it's just, you go back and you look at the ACC, other than Clemson, there's been no consistently good team in the ACC going back to Florida State in the early 2010s. They were consistently good in, 10, 11, 12, or 12, 13, and 14, especially with Jameis Winston, 13 or 14, winning the national title in 2013, getting to the playoffs but losing in round 1 in 2014. And since then, it's been Clemson has been the best team every year, really, in the ACC. And the second best team just seems to change almost every single year. So it's hard to predict, at least for me, that Pitt is going to make a return trip to the ACC title game. Now, what does that mean for their chances against Tennessee? Well, I'll tell you right now, if this was a home game for Tennessee, I would be extremely confident if I was a Tennessee fan that we could win this game. You have to think Tennessee is going to take a significant step forward in year 2 of a new coaching staff when they return a quarterback, especially in Josh Heupel's system, right? Josh Heupel's system, in my opinion, is very quarterback-centric. You need a quarterback who is capable and has the ability to effectively run the style of offense that Josh Heupel likes to run. Hendon Hooker showed us last year he has the ability to do that. So you have to think Tennessee as a team and Hendon Hooker as a quarterback are going to be better year 2 in this system than they were in year 1. Tennessee really, they need to make a, you know what's going to be the difference between Tennessee winning, let's say, 8 games versus them winning 10? Or maybe, well, no, 10. The difference between them winning 8 and 10 is going to be the defense, right? If you look at Tennessee's schedule, they have, of course, Pitt on the road. You guys can let me know down below what you think about that as far as who's going to win if you want to give your predictions already. But then when you look at their conference schedule, of course, they're in the SEC East, right? So Georgia stands out. You have to assume that's probably a loss. They only play in Athens this year, too. The game was in Knoxville last year, I believe. So in Athens, you have to figure that's probably a loss. And then, of course, they play Alabama. That's probably a loss. But you look at the rest of the teams they have to play in the SEC East. Now, traditionally, at least the last 20 years or so, Florida has dominated Tennessee. If there was a time when Tennessee was going to beat Florida, you would think it would be this coming season, don't you? A lot of turmoil in Gainesville the last half of last season, which, of course, led to the firing of Dan Mullen. They bring in Billy Napier, never coached in the Power 5 before, at least not as a head coach. You would think, I mean, if Tennessee's not going to beat Florida in 2022, when are they going to beat Florida? You know, this just seems to set up for a Tennessee win over Florida. So even if you're assuming that Tennessee is going to lose to Georgia and Alabama, Florida right now, like if Tennessee and Florida were playing tomorrow, I would have to pick Tennessee, I think. Then you have South Carolina, year 2 under Frank Beamer. You know, they're going to get a little bit better. They bring Spencer Rattler in at QB, but I still don't think they're better than Tennessee. That should be a game Tennessee wins. Mizzou, well, you almost forget Mizzou even has a team. Got to assume Tennessee will win that one. What about Kentucky? Now, this is where it gets interesting if you're Tennessee, right? Tennessee has completely owned Kentucky throughout history. And even in the last 10 to 15 years when Tennessee has been, well, they've been maybe the worst they've ever been the last 10 to 15 years. They almost always have found a way to beat Kentucky, even in their bad years, Tennessee. If they beat Kentucky this year, they could be looking at a 10-2 type season if they get through the Pitt game. Am I wrong? If they beat Pitt and beat Kentucky, hard to imagine them losing then to Florida or South Carolina or Vandy or Mizzou, isn't it? I mean, just to me, and believe me, nobody loves coming on here and bashing Tennessee more than I do, and I've got a lot of questions about their defense. I do. And now, if their defense is as piss poor as it was last year, they'll lose a couple of those games to maybe a South Carolina or a Kentucky or somebody like that. But if that offense can continue to improve incrementally from what it was last year and the defense can take a few steps forward, I do think it's possible Tennessee goes something like 10-2 next year. It's going to be interesting to see because the Tennessee fans have been waiting a long time for a good season. Unfortunately, I don't see a way really where Tennessee wins the East. I just don't. I think Georgia, Georgia lost a lot defensively, but they've recruited so good on that side of the ball. And if you don't trust Kirby Smart on anything else at all, don't you have to trust him on defense at least? So it's hard to imagine Georgia's defense is just going to fall off a cliff. It probably won't be as good as it was this past season, but it's not like it's going to nosedive. And offensively, they get almost everybody back. I mean, they lose James Cook and Zamir White, the two running backs. But again, if you don't know anything else about Georgia, do you even have to look at the roster? Don't you just know they've got a couple of capable running backs? Of course they do. McIntosh comes back, Kendall Milton, Branson Robinson, true freshman coming in, I think is going to be really good. Every wide receiver is back except for George Pickens, who went to the NFL, and Jermaine Burton, who went to Alabama. Neither of those two wide receivers made much of an impact last year at Georgia, honestly. I mean, Georgia's offense last year really was motivated by freshmen, Brock Bowers, A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey. We do have some other wide receivers. Karis Jackson comes back. So, to get a lot back on offense, I trust Kirby on defense. Hard to go as far as picking Tennessee to win the East, in my opinion. I just don't think they'll be able to beat Georgia on the road. And then, you look at Georgia's schedule, at worst, they're probably going to go 11-1, something like that. So Georgia probably win the East again, but Tennessee could have a really good year. Tennessee could go 10-2. Well, what about a New Year's Six? Oh, my God. I can't believe I'm even about to ask this. Is it possible Tennessee makes a New Year's Six bowl in 2022? What if they go 10-2 and their only losses are to Georgia and Alabama? I'm serious. Look at their schedule. And look, I know they've been terrible. They found ways to lose. I get it. Eventually, Tennessee's going to have another good year. Could this be the year? Look at the schedule. I mean, are you really going to pick Tennessee right now to lose to South Carolina or Mizzou or Vandy? What about Kentucky and Pitt? Kentucky and Pitt, to me, are key games, right? The Kentucky and Pitt game and Tennessee's defense. That's what's going to be the difference between Tennessee going 8-4 versus potentially 10-2. Pitt, oh man, lightning struck last year with Kenny Pickett. I just can't get that high on Pitt for next year. I just can't. I've said this about the ACC for a long time, and I think Pitt's a good example of this. To me, the ACC is a bunch of 6- and 7-win teams in terms of talent and ability. But because they play each other all year long, a couple of those 6- or 7-win teams are going to end up with 8, 9, or 10 wins. That was Pitt last year. I don't think they can do it again. If I had to pick the game right now, I'd probably pick Tennessee to win it, even though it's on the road in Pittsburgh. What's the weather like in Pittsburgh the beginning of September? It can't be too cold. I know it's not snowing or anything, so I can't imagine weather being any type of a factor. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see for the Vols. They need a good season. Heupel needs a good season. The fans deserve a good season, as much as I hate to say it. And look, Tennessee can go 11-1 for all I care, as long as that one loss is to Georgia. But I understand Tennessee fans being excited for this upcoming season. Now, just like with any fan base, you got some of them that are completely out of control with we're going 11-1, winning the East. We're going to be in the SEC championship game, a chance to make the playoffs. I don't think any of that is true. And even that poll that had them in the top 10, I think, is a little sketchy. It just seems to me Tennessee, and I get it, preseason polls don't mean anything and blah, blah, blah. I understand that. They're mostly based off past performance. And to be honest, that's kind of my issue with having Tennessee in the top 10 in the preseason. It just seems to me like I need to see Tennessee win something before I would feel comfortable ranking them anywhere within a top 10. Go on the road and beat Pitt, Start out 2-0, 3-0, whatever it is. You have the Florida game early in the year. You get past that Florida game undefeated, you may be in everyone's top 10 by that point, and it won't matter. So keep that in mind if you can. Anyway, Tennessee versus Pitt, another interesting non-con matchup for 2022. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments section. Have a good morning.